Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. I am so excited to bring this show to you today. I bet you're thinking, she says that all the time. I do say that all the time, but that's because God gives me the best guests. Today, I have a story that so many of you are going to want to hear. I work in the reconciliation business, and this beautiful young lady here contacted me and said, have I got a reconciliation story for you? So, JoBeth Strawn is here today with her son, Peter Strawn. Both of you are going to share your part of the story that I think is going to give a lot of people hope. So, JoBeth, Peter, thank you both for being on the Breakfast with Bacon show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
JoBeth, when you first sent me your email, I think I contacted you the same day that I got.
Right. I was
Right.
shocked.
It was it was awesome. So I can tell them you were married 20 years.
Correct.
Your husband was a deacon in the Catholic Church. You had
Correct.
four children, one in heaven through a miscarriage. And 2 months after your husband was ordained a deacon, he left the marriage, married the other woman. They were married for how many years?
Less than 20, but they were together for about 20 years.
When he had a change of heart, which you'll talk about, and that divorce went through, and he remarried his covenant spouse. And you two have been remarried, right? Married still, for a total of how many years now?
Well, 21 years this time.
But the
So
total from your original anniversary,
we
what
were
was it?
we were 61. We were married in 1960.
61 years. God bless you. Peter, I can't wait to get your take on this, but I'm going to just start with your mom. JoBeth, take us back. How did you guys meet? Tell me about the beginning of your love story, and then we'll kind of go into where it broke before we get into the healing.
Okay. Um, I was going to Holy Names College here in Oakland, um, and I was majoring in mathematics. And because it's a small school and a small group in the mathematics club, we gotten speakers. So we contacted USF, uh, the Jesuit University in San Francisco. And my husband at that time was the president of his math club, and I was the president of my math club. So I went over there to have a meeting in a shared speaker. And that's how we first met.
And you
And then
dated
they,
for how long before you two married?
um, less than a year,
Awesome. Awesome.
less than a year.
So you were married 20 years. Did you have a lot of difficulties? Did you have no difficulties? I mean, no marriage had no difficulties, but
No, that's the reason that it shocked me so much. We really didn't have difficulties, and we were so uh, united in our spirituality. I mean, we were on a healing team with the Jesuit priest who was the had been assigned by the Bishop of San Francisco to be one of the exorcists. But in exorcism, there's also healing of memories and a lot of healing that goes on. People think exorcism just is, the whole thing. Mm-mm. 3/4 to 99% of that healing is a healing of memories and a big part of forgiving the person that offended you or whatever happened. And the big thing that God taught me that this priest, and he invited us to come into that ministry. So we were ministering to people in our home up to 4 nights a week. Plus, we were lectors, we were Eucharistic ministers in our church. And then he went through the 3 year process of being ordained a permanent deacon in 1979. And the wives were allowed to go to the religious education, which was once a week for 3 years. I went to all of those. So we were very participatory, and it's like, wow, God, what have you done? Why? It seems to me like we're doing your will. How much more do you want us to do? And that's when Father Joe Debos, who was the head of the healing group, he said, you really need to forgive God. And I don't know that many people speak about that. And I didn't understand that at all. I went home and I had to look up forgiveness. I'm like, what? You know, God didn't do anything wrong. He just doesn't do what I want him to do sometimes.
Yeah. And we get angry at him and we have to forgive
So,
him of
yeah.
that.
So I had to do that. So, as far as our marriage, we were very, very active spiritually, supporting each other, just linked arm in arm, spirit and spirit.
And then, so things were good. So my regular listeners, viewers know my story that I married my husband. We were happy. We were having our second child, and then I left for another man. And so infidelity happens not necessarily because you planned it. Most of the time, you don't plan it. Almost never do you plan it. It's just something that happens. Your boundaries were low. And then you catch yourself in this situation like, what the heck did I do? So we were separated 4 years, got back together, and we've been married now 38 years. And I
Praise
talked to,
God.
yes, yes, I'm so grateful. Happily married too. And so I do talk to people about, when it happens, infidelity doesn't happen to unhappy couples necessarily. You can be a perfectly happy couple, and
Right.
Satan can slide in there if your boundaries are low. So you were stunned at the revelation that all of a sudden, so I don't like to exploit, but I will go as deep as anyone will allow themselves to go. So take us to when this happened, when it found out, how did the marriage deteriorate leading up to the divorce?
Okay. Well, I had a dream before this happened. And in the dream, I found Lee and the other woman in bed together. And in the dream, I found myself with my father's 45 gun, which I had pointed at them. And in the dream, I was trying to decide which one should I kill. And when I go to the jail ministry, because, they see this old woman and they think, oh, you're so nice and you're so spiritual. And I'm like, you know, then it dawned on me, why didn't I shoot both of them?
Right.
Because they were both culpable. And when I told them about the dream, uh, he's like, oh, no, 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 nothing's happening, blah, blah. I had no inkling whatsoever. And then one evening we were laying in bed and praying, and I all of a sudden, you know how we women do, we kind of want to dig and find out things because men aren't necessarily real communicative. And I said, do you still love me? And he skirted the question, but still I didn't think anything about it. When I woke up the next morning, he was packing his bags and he said, I'm leaving. And I had no idea that apparently he and the other woman had gotten together. The not funny, haha, but funny, peculiar thing about it is that because he was a deacon, we were counseling her and her husband in their marriage.
Yeah.
So that's why they say it's so important for a male and a female, if you're together, to counsel other couples
Yeah.
together. So he left. He divorced me, not only civilly, but he had our marriage annulled, and he married her civilly and in the church. So never, 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 never in the furthest wonderful dream of imagination did I think we would ever come back together. In my dreams, what I saw to resolve this, so to speak, in my fantasy, I saw us together in heaven explaining to each other what happened, you know, as we forgave one another. And I even imagined what would happen if he died. And then I told myself, well, you won't be able to go to the funeral, but God will hear your prayers at home. So those were my two visions of what the future would be for our marriage.
So he is gone, and you told me that you had a prayer for 10 years and then another prayer for the next 10 years. And Peter, I'll get to you in a minute.
Oh,
Oh,
that's all right.
yeah, you've probably heard this story before, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You've lived it, yes. JoBeth,
Well,
you prayed for 10 years to have the grace to forgive, or that was the second 10 years?
no, that was the first 10 years. And what I want to say to everyone, I think my main message that God wants me to put out to everybody, that healing can happen, but it can't happen unless you forgive. And the way he came to me, he put it to me. And each other person, you need to search how high he's going to do it to you. He will not necessarily do it the way he did it for me.
Right.
And he did it for me in a way because my major is mathematics. So he gave it to me in a formula. And it happened also, because I was in the healing ministry and exorcism ministry. Whenever I would envision him and her together, I would say, in the name of Jesus Christ, I will to forgive. Now, not every priest or other person believes that there's two parts in forgiveness. I happen to believe that there's two parts in forgiveness: my will and my feelings. So I would say, in the name of Jesus Christ, I will to forgive them. I don't feel forgiving, Lord, so I give my feelings to you because only you can heal my feelings of unforgiveness. And that's how I prayed for 10 years. And when he finally came in and gave me the grace to help me complete that forgiveness, it was as if an elephant had been lifted off
Yes.
my shoulders. I know exactly the day and the circumstances and
Yep.
everything when that happened. So then the next 10 years, I prayed for to be able to love them.
Them, not just your husband,
Right,
but the
correct.
other woman as well. I mean,
Right.
what a gift of grace that is to even want to pray that prayer. That's
We,
grace.
we have to. We
No,
have
we
to.
don't.
God
No, we
orders
don't.
us. Well, if we
Yes,
want to
and
get
we
to
can
heaven,
choose not to. And you
that's right.
chose to do the Christ-like thing.
Right.
Wow.
And
Which eventually happened.
one time I was on the phone with her and I didn't, I could hear that she was drunk. And I was telling her something, and it was the most strange feeling. I'm like, how can I sense hatred for her and love for her as my sister at the same time? God, how can that be? I didn't understand it, but I acknowledged it because that was the matter of fact of what was happening to me. That you can come up, still feel hatred for what the situation that happened, that she was participatory in, and yet love her as my sister. She was my best friend.
Peter, I'd like you to interject at this point. So take us to kind of three directions, not three directions, one direction, three answers. What did you think about your parents' answer or marriage before all this happened? What were your feelings when your parents were split up? And kind of fill in the blanks here from what your mom just shared with us.
So I was 15 years old when this was happening. I had just gone into my sophomore year of high school, and I was already the weirdo on the block because my parents were the religious ones, and I was already separated out from our community uh, in the neighborhood because my parents sent me to a Catholic high school, which separated me from the public school. So I didn't participate with anyone around the community except for people in our church and people in our immediate area, my neighbors and stuff. So I was doing uh, because of the way that I reacted to our counselors. I was sent to a counselor because the school found out that my parents were getting divorced. So the counselor sat me down and was talking to me, and because of the manner in which I absorbed this divorce, he wanted me to be a peer counselor. So he had me going around, he made me a peer counselor, and in secret, I would go around to different students that were outcasts and sitting by themselves, and so I started uh, my career of seeking out the people on the outside lines and people that were not included in in the main areas of where people congregated at. So
Because of the divorce, you kind of marched into that.
right, right. It led me into being, you know,
The
being
minister.
more right, a minister and reaching out, and you know, it was a weird time because I had started, drugs then, and alcohol. So
Because of the divorce, do you think? I mean,
no, I don't think it was a rebellious time for me at that age. So I was, it's a natural thing to want to be away from your parents at that time. So
yeah.
everything kind of came together at that time. So
What did you feel about, did you have any feelings towards your dad or your mom? Did you like either one of them, not like them? Did you support this? Did you not support this?
no, I love both my parents, and I knew that it wasn't my fault that this was happening. So, and that's the attitude I took. It wasn't my fault. It didn't have anything to do with me. So I wasn't in denial or I wasn't messed up about it.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah. So
So
I
what
had
about, go
nothing to
ahead.
fix in that area.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, because a lot of us,
Starting a new area of where I would would ruin my life.
you mean you did start going another area where you ruined your life, or you said you could have?
I no, I did. I went into drugs and alcohol. So,
Yeah.
but it wasn't because of
Of your
this
parents'
divorce.
divorce. Right.
Yeah, no.
What was it like for you as a child growing up then with a stepmother, this other woman who had been your mom's best friend and now she's in your dad's house? Did you visit, to see him? These are intimate questions I'm going to ask because, people today try to say, oh, it doesn't bother the kids at all. But seeing your dad in bed with another woman when you were in this house and and you have to acknowledge this because the world says, well, that's his wife. Was that comfortable? Was that awkward? Did you get used to it? Take us in those
So
20 years.
she was younger than my mother, and I don't know by how much. How much, Mom?
10 years.
10. Yeah, she was 10 years younger. So, and she had kids as well. So she had 4 kids, and they were all in the house as well. What my dad did was he invited me to go to college down there where they were living at, and he got basically me and him an apartment. So it was separate households at first, which was smart of my dad because he separated me from that. So it was probably about 2.5 to 3 years of that, of me going to college and and interacting with the other family. So it was a slow commingling.
Integration.
Yeah, and I was I was okay with it because I was going to college and getting my education and and I was separate from them. So it wasn't like I was thrown in and I had to be there because I didn't.
Right.
I left my mom's house, at that time and went to live with my dad. So
Did you ever
that
think in your
upset mom.
wildest, well, yeah, we could talk about that in a minute, but did you ever think in your wildest dreams that your parents would reconcile? Or did you ever wish for that?
No, nope, no, I did not. No, that was in no way was that a thought of mine at all.
Was that they would or that you wanted them to?
No, no, no. I never wished that or desired that just because of they were separate people at that time. So there were 2 different families to deal with.
Yeah. You just
So
accepted the situation for what it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So JoBeth, you went through these 20 years. The first 10 years you prayed for forgiveness, you forgave. The second 10 years you prayed. Tell me again, what were the second 10 years that you would
To be
love?
able to love them.
To love them. Was there a moment where you recognized that you did love them both?
As I say, I was on a phone with her and I
Oh,
could
that
feel
was the
these,
moment.
yeah, the feeling of hate and love coming up at the same time. And I go, what is this? How can you feel hate and love at the same time? It's just, this is impossible.
Right.
But we are capable of that. And that
Did the
was my
hate
first
disappear right after that?
experience.
Did the
I
hate
don't know how
disappear?
long it took. I don't know how long it took, but I have helped her family because she's disabled. I have helped her to inform them that she qualified because they were married more than 10 years, uh, half of the amount not taken away from him, but half of the amount, equivalent of half of the amount of his Social Security. And in order to do that, I needed to prove that had been married. And so I took Lee and myself down to the courthouse in Oakland. And that's when I found out that in their civil marriage, he had required that they keep that marriage secret, which was a surprise to me. And so he had to sign papers to say that he released those papers. So I got the papers and I pushed through the whole qualification of her receiving the equivalent of one half of his Social Security.
To do that, does that mean that you're going to receive
No,
50%?
I have my own, but because of what I've worked, I don't have anything to
But
do with it.
regardless, if you hadn't done that, your husband would have received 100% of the Social Security into your home.
He still does. He still does receive 100% of his because I worked 30
So you
years
don't
plus.
get less. She just gets an additional 50% of that figure.
Correct. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
The equivalent of
Okay.
it, but it doesn't take away any money from his Social Security.
Okay. So that is very loving. Despite this 20 years apart, you were there to help her. I mean, that is only Christ right there. Well, tell us about the reconciliation then. So was this an instant on the spot? Was this it took time? I mean, so I'm sure my viewers are like, okay, get to the good stuff. How did this reconciliation happen?
Well, what I have to say is you need to go to Peter because he was the beginning of it, of their separating. Peter?
Yeah. So my dad ended up going into the hospital to have an operation. He had a EVM, which is a cluster of
Veins.
veins the size of a golf ball, and it was in the center of his left hemisphere of his brain, and there was no way to operate on it without messing him up. So that what they did was they went in through the groin area and came up through and siliconed off the one vein going in that was and that cut off the leak that was happening in his brain of blood. So they were successful in doing that. And when they were pulling out their equipment, he ended up getting a blood clot and having a stroke. So that messed him up. So he was in the hospital, and he ended up getting pneumonia, and he was looking pretty bad. And I went in, I was working and at the time, and we'd go in and pray. I'd pray, Dad, don't you want to, give him encouragement? Don't you want to see your grandkids grow up? And, so we prayed. I prayed for him diligently every time I went to the hospital and out, of course, but he recovered and got on his feet, and he was walking every day. And, he cannot communicate to this day as well as he could before. He makes it, he's got his own language now.
Which you understand because you're
Yeah,
family.
so
Not necessarily.
yeah. So we don't understand a lot of it, but he communicates through gestures and different ways of speaking. But mom and me are getting pretty adept at that. But anyway, back onto the subject. His wife at the time decided that that wasn't going to be good enough for her, so she went out and sought the comfort of other men. Uh, and she'd go out with my wife and go play pool at a bar, and I found out that she was being unfaithful to my dad, and I told my dad, I said, hey, she's not being faithful to you, so do you still want to be with her? And he said, no. So and during this time, his wife at the time was trying to press for getting a different mobile home that they were living in, a different one, a better one. And I said, I don't think he wants to buy that with you. But anyway, that's how it started to unravel, my dad and his other spouse. And he ended up telling her that he didn't want to be with her. So that's how that's ended. It ended because of me basically finding out and explaining to my dad what was going on. He didn't know what was going on. So
Re-enter JoBeth. How?
Well, one of the things that people need to visualize is that they lost their house and they bought a mobile home between Peter and our other son, Kirk. So he can go from their house over to Peter's house walking, even though he had the stroke, or go over to Kirk's house. So the situation was at that point is that he was still in the routine of avoiding me. So if I would go to Peter's house, he would out the back door and leave for Kirk's, and same thing, vice versa. And so Kirk, he was mostly staying at Kirk's in the end once the divorce process happened. And I remember Kirk telling me one day that he had a talk with his dad and said, Dad, now she comes over here and you give her money and you talk to her. He's like, why not talk to mom? You've got two women that you're divorced from and you talk with the one. Well, why not, talk with mom? And so I guess he said, okay. And so the first meeting that we had an outing together was to go to Kirk's son's new school that he was going to be in. And we met at Pete's mobile home. And so that was the first time, kind of sort of, that we came together and went someplace together.
And he was still in the process of divorcing the other woman, or was it final at
Right.
this point?
Right. No, he
Still
was
in the
still
process.
divorcing her. Mm-hmm.
So when did you get this point? I mean, was that a slow transition to, okay, I can talk to her, this isn't so bad? Did it become romantic, or did it become true love where it's like, this is my wife? Tell me what happened where you go,
No.
we need to redo this.
Okay. So I was, my background is multiple jobs, but mainly in the end, a nursing home administrator. So I was in Los Banos and I had some medical problems that I was going to Stanford for. And so I would go to Kirk's house, and because there was room there for me to spend the night, and then go early morning on Monday, so I wouldn't be away from the facility
Sure.
for too long. And so they had him set up with a TV in his bedroom and a recliner, and so I would go in there and lay on the bed because there was no room for another chair, and we would watch EWTN together. So then one day, and he's showing me these National Geographic magazines, like he wanted to go, on trips.
Because he couldn't speak, right? This is
Now
now
he
post.
speaks, he does a lot of verbiage, but 99.9% of it, you can't understand it.
Okay. And back then as well, you couldn't understand
Correct.
it, which is why he was using the magazines.
Right.
Okay.
And so I said to him one day, I was able to find a triplex place to rent in Los Banos for only $400 a month. So I rented that, a 2-bedroom, living room, bathroom, kitchen, etc. So I said, would you like to go with me out to Los Banos just to have a change in the scenery for a while, because there are 2 bedrooms. And so he said yes. And basically, he never left. And I was so nervous when I, was coming back here to my home in the East Bay of San Francisco for another job. I couldn't get an answer from him. I said, do you want to go with me? There was no, the only time we kissed was at a kiss of peace in Mass. There was no overture of
Right. Romance or romantic
romance or
feelings or
nothing,
right.
nothing. And so I'm like, well, I only have one bed, and, I don't know how that's going to work. Do you want to go with me? And basically he said, yeah, okay. He said,
Can you show the camera? Can he wave to Lee
Lee.
is in the room. Hi Lee, thank you for sharing.
Harvey, well, doing it.
Happy.
We're so glad to have you.
And so we ended up here in my house. This is my parents' home. So one day he was teaching himself to write with his left hand because his right side is affected by the stroke. And he took a piece of paper and put a line down the middle, and he wrote Kathy, and then he wrote Lee, and on the other side he pointed to me. And I'm like, I don't do charades. I don't know what this is. So apparently you want me to see there's something that both of your wives have done or did or what. I said, well, you were married to both of us. And, I went through all the different things. And he finally, I don't even remember exactly how he did it, but he was able to communicate with me that he wanted to marry me. So,
What did you think?
well, I was, kind of blown away, and I wanted to make sure, show the ring. And so then I had the idea that on the anniversary of when we had been married 40 years before, I thought, wouldn't it be because of his medical problems, I really needed to be married to him,
Right.
to have legal say in what was going on with him. So I looked in, I don't care who it is, we can't get married in the church because that marriage isn't annulled. So I'm like, how can I do this? Because it ended up being on a Sunday, that the anniversary, August the 6th, 1960, it fell on a Sunday. And I'm like, the justice of the peace isn't open. I don't know anybody, I don't know how this is going to work, but I want to have it on that day. And so again, I was a nursing home administrator, and I knew that the laundry supervisor, a very beautiful young Black man, was studying to be a minister. And I didn't even know what church it was in. And I said to him, is there anyone in your church who could be recognized by the state of California to legally do marriages? And he says, I can.
Aww.
I'm like, oh, wow. Well, that's great. And so I contacted him. And at the time, I had transferred from convalescent, and I got my license in a assisted living facility. And they didn't have a decent sized office in there, whoever made this building of over 200 residents that I had. So I had an apartment was my office. So he said, well, I can do it after, all the activities at church are done. So I think it was around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. He came over and my immediate family came and he married us. And until he was writing, the paperwork and signing it properly, I didn't realize that he was in a Pentecostal church. So
What did you think he was? Not
I didn't
Catholic?
know.
Oh, okay. You knew it wasn't
I
No,
Catholic.
just, I
couldn't have
just,
been Catholic.
I just knew I needed to have a civil marriage, and I couldn't get a hold of a judge in the court.
Right.
I looked through yellow pages and everything to see who could I get to do this, so it would be on the anniversary of when we were married,
So
because
this was your 40th or your 41st anniversary?
it was the 40th. We
Wow.
had been married 40 years before. So in the year 2000, August 6th of 2000, he married us in an assisted living resident room. And so it took about 3 years for me to petition the priest to have their marriage annulled. And the way that happened, we were just blessed in that his neurologist happened to be dually licensed as a psychiatrist and a neurologist. So I asked her, I said, with this AVM, because his personality had totally changed. And I viewed it like a person who, has a tumor in their brain or
Yeah.
Alzheimer's or dementia. People's whole personalities can change. And that's what happened to him. His whole personality changed. He didn't follow, the spiritual path that he had been on before, because he also requested to be laicized from the
The
permanent
diaconate.
diaconate. Yeah. So the doctor wrote a letter saying that it is possible that because the AVM was growing bigger and bigger and pressuring on the brain, that it could have made it so that he wasn't in his right mind, so to speak, when he married her. And the lawyer priest in the Diocese of Oakland accepted that and gave him the annulment. And so then our marriage was convalidated. And I don't know how yours work, but when your marriage is convalidated, it goes back to the civil marriage, if you had one. It goes back to there and makes it valid that whole time,
Right. Right.
not the whole 3 years.
So you're legally married. Peter, when you heard, how did you hear mom and dad are getting remarried? Did you kind of see it happening, or were you like, wow, great?
No, I didn't see it happening. Well, when my dad went to live with mom, then I had some hope of them getting back together and getting remarried. But only then, up to that point, no.
And I want to touch on that because a lot of children of divorce have convinced themselves, oh, I don't care, or doesn't matter as long as mom or dad's happy. But deep down, children want their mom and their dad in the same house. Did you have any acknowledgement? Because you said if you had hope, it's like, well, why did you hope those two got together? Am I correct? It's like, that's my mom and my dad, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want that.
In the back of your mind, you're thinking that'd be awesome if they got back together. What kid wouldn't want their parents back together? But
Yeah.
and fully accepting that they were divorced, I removed myself from that.
That hope
So
at first.
yeah, that hope. But after being reintroduced to that, through the process that they were going through, that opened that up.
Yeah.
So
Now,
yeah.
I know you can only speak for yourself, and I do not want you to have to put anyone else on the spot, but did you and your siblings have conversations? Were they equally as accepting? Was there anyone saying, I don't want this, or,
No, everyone was for it. Yeah, no one said that. Now, I have an older sister that passed away, early before this happened. So that was one of the times that mom and dad got together, and it was at the hospital that mom found out that dad was getting operated on, and my sister passed away at that time from it was from a aneurysm in her neck that and her brain flooded with blood, and she passed away. So that brought on well, is this something that's that could be passed on to your children, what my dad had, hereditary. So everyone went and got checked out, and everyone was cleared of that, but we had lost my sister before that. So it
I'm
was
guessing she was in her 30s.
29.
Oh,
Yeah, 29.
you didn't tell me that part, JoBeth.
Well,
that
there's
had
so many parts to it, so many parts to it. And here's another thing that I was so angry at him, I could have killed him at that point. Lee. He came to the hospital and he's like, oh, well, a month ago, they finally, in his whole life, no insurance ever did an MRI of his brain to see what was causing the grand mal and petit mal epileptic seizures that he had had since he was 9 years old. And he said to me in the hospital with our daughter dying, she was already brain dead. Yes, my neurologist who found this said it's inheritable. I'm like, oh my God, you knew this a month ago and you didn't tell us, so that if we wanted to, not we, but the kids wanted to, they could have had their brain had an MRI to see if they had it. Oh boy, that was another biggie to forgive. That's huge, huge. And the neurologist she had said it's not inheritable. So, just like you have different doctors have different opinions, but she had no symptoms whatsoever. No,
but that's a lot of trauma to deal with, and the fact, because the death of a child will either tear you up or bring you back together. And in a sense, her death was still playing into your life. And
well, the thing about her is that God let her know. I know that he did, because a year before she died, she came back into the church. She asked, we were involved with a charismatic renewal. She asked to go through the Life in the Spirit seminar again, because they had gone through it when they were younger. And as a matter of fact, the morning she was living here with me, and Thanksgiving fell early that year. So she had her huge Christmas tree downstairs live, and she had the ornaments on it, but she wanted to go get candy canes, little candy canes to hang on it, decorate it with candy canes. And she said, can I borrow your car? I'm like, sure, to go down and get those. And I came upstairs, and all of a sudden I heard a commotion, and I went downstairs, and she was laying on the floor, and she had her hand to her throat. And she said, I have this. She was paralyzed from the neck down. And she said she had this terrible headache. So her boyfriend at the time, I said, come on, we got to get her into the car, because I know, since my mother died here or was in the process of dying, I said, I know how long it takes the ambulance and the fire, everybody to get here. Let's just take her. And boy, a person is dead weight, speaking that. We got her in the car. On the way to the hospital, she said, Mom, give me something for the headache. I said, Denise, I can't, because you could have dysphagia due to a stroke, and which is what I think you had. And I could give you an aspirin or something. And because you could have dysphagia, it means you couldn't swallow, you could choke to death.
Right.
So on the way to the hospital, we were praying in tongues, and they took her in. And while I was out filling out the insurance forms, I heard a commotion in, and I ran back in, and she had begun to vomit, and there was no other person to assist. So I started grabbing towels to help the nurse who was in there to assist. So I was at peace about her death. I really truly believe that God takes us at the most opportune time
Yes.
that we would be able to reach heaven. And I knew that she had accepted the graces that were coming from prayers and her guardian angel and maybe our grandparents and whatever, that I knew that she was, the best prepared, that Jesus wanted her to come then.
Yeah, I heard from her mouth, you know, Jesus, take me now. I'm ready. I'm ready
Aw.
now. So, we were all, devastated that, we lost her, but the, the graces were there. The graces were there for us to see.
Yeah, and the fact that you two can handle it with such grace now shows that God worked in your hearts as well.
Right.
Wow. Well, only for the sake of time. It has been 20 years since you reconciled with your husband.
Mhm.
What are the greatest lessons you've learned? What are messages? What tell me about those past 20 years? What has God said to either one of you?
Um, well, we're in a marriage. You're both supposed to help each other go to heaven. You're supposed to be a help. And one of the things that I have told Lee is that I know you had the gift of preaching and teaching, and that you really love to do that, but you can't do that anymore. But we are still a team. And even though I go out and do ministry, I need you here because we are still a team, and you need to be praying, or else um, what God wants in my ministry, it's still our ministry, but it's a real challenge, because he still wants to be the supervisor, and he tells us what to do. And many times we have forgotten to do that, both Peter and I, and he directs us to do it. But it's really frustrating, you know, to have him, still directing, do this and do that. So I keep praying for patience, and God just keeps saying, I'm giving you all these things to be patient about, and I'm not stepping up to the
Right.
plate good enough as I see it. But we hold
Peter?
hands and go through prayers and at mass, and um, pray together. Even we might be laying in bed when we say attend mass, and we hold hands together. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So,
I've learned that through my parents that this, marriage is a ministry, and that's, that's the cross that we're supposed to bear. And there's a lot of sacrifice in it, and that you got to be humble about that.
yeah, there
Otherwise,
is.
you're not going to survive it.
Easy question and then a specific question for you, Peter. Um, it may be an easy question, maybe it's not, but now that you've matured and grown, both of you, what is love?
Love is giving. Love is sacrificing your needs and your wants for someone else.
Yeah.
I learned,
Yes.
Christ was sent here to teach us that. That's an easy question. So what's the
Good.
hard one?
not easy to question it, but not easy to
Right.
do.
It's an easy answer, but it's hard to
Right.
do.
Right. It's great in theory.
Right.
Peter, how has your parents' divorce and reconciliation affected your own marriage?
Hmm.
Well, they got married in the church afterwards.
Right. Yeah. We weren't married in a church. Actually, when I went back to get our records for my retirement, I went to get our civil marriage papers, and they didn't even have them. They said, we don't have any paperwork." So we didn't have any paperwork for the first part of our marriage, but we ended up getting married in a church in 2004. So that was sufficient for the retirement papers. But my wife and I have been married 33 years.
What a blessing.
Yeah,
And
very
then
blessed, very blessed.
Then he witnessed to his stepsister who came back to the church, and her husband.
Two of them, the two.
Yeah, and then she witnessed to her sister. So both girls women came back to the church, and Yo-Yo's and her husband got their marriage blessed. So Peter witnessing has not only, helped in his marriage that they saw that, but his stepsisters and brother-in-law, sister, whatever you would call Rob.
Right.
It's funny because you don't want to have to go through all this pain. And I tell this to people all the time. Had your husband not left you, had that woman and her children not become part of your family, you might not have ever been close enough to get them back into the church. You wonder if sometimes, of course, it's more than just one thing, but even if for that alone, 2 souls are in heaven because you guys tolerated, learned to love, learned to forgive through this trying cross you carried. And look at the great redemption at the end.
Right. And all the seeds we got to plant along the way that we don't even know the results of those. Very seldom do you get to see the product of your planting a seed in different people, and through interaction and letting Christ's light shine through you to other people. Very seldom do you get to see the results of that, and we have been very blessed to see an extreme amount of God's work in our lives through us. And
fruition is the word.
Yeah, fruition. Yeah,
a lot of fruits.
Yeah, a lot of fruits from this pain. So we know that the pain brings fruits, and that's God's work. That's how God's in it. Your pain is not for nothing.
When I die, I have this vision of God turning me around and putting his arm around my shoulder and pointing out there and going, "You see that? You see all those people there? All of those people are here because of you." And I pray that when that day comes, there'll be millions of people there.
Right.
That's my wish.
I pray there'll be one.
Well, it sounds like you have at least two.
At least.
He's given us all different missions. He's given me this passionate desire to save 1 million marriages before I die, which in turn is really to save 1 million souls. So
wow, yeah, praise God. Well, God bless your endeavors, obviously.
Yeah, I need the prayers. Okay, so one last question. Well, it's second last question. It's not even a question. Name one thing you'd have our viewers do differently as a result of something they heard today.
In order for healing to happen in any circumstance, and I think that's the mission the main mission that God has given me on this earth, and maybe if that gets completed through this, maybe he will let me go to him. But the main mission is nothing is going to be healed if you don't forgive. God wants to forgive. He's waiting there to flow his love, to flow his healing for you. And you put up a wall of unforgiveness, he can't get through. And he will help you to forgive. He will help you to forgive. Might be 20 years praying for Peter, and his conversion and being delivered was 25 years. My next door neighbor, she prayed for her husband 70 years for him to come into the church. And we were arch enemies, he and I. Peter and I ended up ministering to him. I ended up being his godmother, and he was baptized. So never say never. God can do it his way.
Peter, one thing you'd have our viewers do differently.
I'd say that to say yes, open your heart and say yes to God, and He'll take care of the rest. He will guide you and lead you through prayer and through an open heart. You know, if you close your heart and close your mind and you know, and say you don't forgive God for what He's done to you, it's a relationship with God, you know, but it's a two-way relationship, and you have to be open to that. And I think that's the most important thing, is the relationship with God, in that it's both ways. You can be angry at God, and you can, you know, voice your opinions to God. He's going to listen to you.
Yeah.
He created you for that. So I think that's the most important. The most important thing is your relationship with God, because that's where we're ultimately going to
everything.
spend eternity. So eternity's a long time. This is just a granule of sand,
Just
Your
so
Honor.
little.
You know.
Okay, one last fill in the blank and then we'll take us off the air. When I die, I will know my life has been a success
If one marriage has been saved through the witness of ours.
Amen.
Peter, you can't cop out. You got to get your own.
you
You can't go at mom's.
I'm going to go with the prayer that I have to pray every day. I'll feel that I was successful here on earth if my children come back into the church,
Yes.
because that's always an open wound for most of us that are in the church and going to church. And my children are eking in that direction. So
Yeah, most of us are.
Right.
Well, God bless you both. I wish Lee were able to share. I'm glad he was able to be in the show. And Peter, thank you for taking time as well, for giving that other dimension that we don't always get, is the dimension of the child of divorce. But the angels in heaven must have been singing when you guys reconciled, and that God has blessed you with more years on this end of the marriage than in the beginning. What a gift that is. And so I pray that God blesses both of you, both your marriages, both your families, with a grace incomprehensible, and that you can just drop to your knees and say, thank you, God. This can only be because of you.
Amen.
Amen.
And so for each of you listening and watching, we hope the same thing for you. Don't ever give up on God. Don't ever give up on your children. Don't ever think that it's too late for anything. And do not think that anything is too impossible for God. Nothing is impossible with God. So if you can't say what these two wonderful people have said today, forward this show to your friends and family members. Let them do the talking for you. You know, one plants the seed, one waters, and God causes the growth. So you might just want to water and forward this. I would love for you to like me. I'm doing a lot of my work through social media instead. Go ahead and like Breakfast with Bacon on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and share it with your friends and family. Don't ever think that a marriage is impossible to reconcile. Send them one of my posts, and they can contact me, and you don't even ever have to know about it. So we're in this game together here. So anyway, I have taken us off the air. I want to see if you two remember how we do this. So and one last thing, go to my website, breakfastwithbacon.com, and you can find out about this, my book, The Super Couple, A Formula for Extreme Happiness in Marriage. Listen to my other radio show guests, and so much more. Now I'm going to take us off the air. I am Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I'd like to remind you always to live your life. Can you guys do it? Sunny side
Side up.
That's right.